That is tonight's last word on my last day at the Washington Post. Definitely the end of an era. I want to thank my colleagues at the Post for all their years of great work.
So liberal hack Jonathan Capehart has stepped down from the Washington Post after 18 years there because he doesn't like the idea of having to be positively reporting the news, among other reasons. Well, you won't be missed, Jonathan, especially on PBS, since our tax dollars helped support your commentary there. On that subject, I never did make a video of his coverage of election night 2024, and I thought this would be a fun opportunity to take a look back at last November when he went from smug to devastated as the votes came in for Donald Trump.
We need to recognize that this atmosphere of violence that we are contending with is because one of the two candidates for president throughout his entire campaign has invoked violent rhetoric right up until the last couple of days. And so we are here because a person who used to be president of the United States and should know better and should be about bringing us together has decided not to do that aggressively.
An NBC News poll out in September showed that 2/3 of the American public believes that the country is on the wrong track. The current president is unpopular, the affordability crisis is real, inflation is real. Many Americans think the economy is bad, even though on paper it isn't. That's a real obstacle for the Harris-Walz campaign to have to surmount.
And maybe people think we're on the wrong track because reproductive freedom is in jeopardy and the threats to democracy.
That Madison Square Garden rally, though, to use your phrase, really did get liberals mad. And it's interesting because we're living in this universe where the competition for attention is so fierce and people's perceptions of these candidates, more so with Donald Trump, is so calcified that it's hard for really anything to break through. But what that insult comic said about Puerto Rico really broke through, Jonathan. And we'll see if the degree of the blowback tonight. But why do you think that resonated when, you know, John Kelly saying that Donald Trump fits the textbook definition of a fascist, you could say didn't resonate in the same way?
Look, that Madison Square Garden rally was just a hate fest from beginning to end. And the fact that you had this comic there to say these jokes that were racist, xenophobic, sexist, and that's the beginning of the night. And then it just kept going in that tone for the rest of the night, including from the headliner of the evening, Donald Trump. And for that to be part of the closing message, and I'm with Judy, I would like to know how much this language impacts the way people are going into the voting booth and impacts the way they're thinking about who they want to lead them. But I also think that Madison Square Garden concerned Americans. And let's not put the labels on it, but I do think a lot of Americans looked at that and thought, what the entire hell is happening?
And also, you have a very sort of compromised messenger at the top in Donald Trump, in that he doesn't spend a whole lot of time focusing on policy or Supreme Court decisions. And what he's doing now is sort of the way he ran his real estate industry. He was like, what do I got to do to get you into this property, right? And so he's trying now, is like, telling voters, what do I need to do to get you into my position on this issue, and how is it going to appeal to you? And that comes off as very inauthentic. And so there is no through line between the presidential candidate down through the rest of the ballot. And that has been, I think it'll prove to have been a challenge, I think, in the Philadelphia suburbs and suburbs like it around the country on that issue.
And we've seen this persistent gender gap. Will that be the death knell for him in some states?
So far, no. I don't see it. It's sort of been a wash so far. Yeah. And I don't think the campaign had much to do with why young men are going for Trump. I think it's because if you look at 2/3 of the people in the bottom of high school classes, 2/3 are men. If you go to the top of high school classes, 2/3 are women.
Yes, no, this is the trend we've been seeing anyway.
So this is
right?
a trend. So I think the young men are just like, the system is out to get me, and they're voting.
Really what's happening tonight is America is basically on trial, in that we're going to find out who we are through this election. And the fact that despite the things that Donald Trump said on the campaign trail, the things that he's promised on the campaign trail, a lot of things that are concerning to millions of people, and he's still getting more votes than he did the last go round. That to me is more concerning than, the vice president's not doing as well. For me, that's what I'm looking at and what I'm most concerned about what I'm about to learn about the American people through this election.
Seth, what are you paying closest attention to at this hour, both in terms of the balance of power in the Congress, but also in the presidential race?
Well, the blue wall is called the blue wall for a reason. Yeah. And we are living the blue wall. It's the blue wall or bust, looks like, for Kamala Harris.
I mean, there's a shift right, and then there's a shift to Trump. And shifting to Trumpism. And, I'm looking at a lot of things, especially after David talked about looking at counties and, how Trump is gaining on what he did in 2020. And to me, I'm mystified in some ways, simply because we're talking about a twice impeached, 4 times indicted, convicted on 34 felony counts, former president. You have all of the things he's been saying on the campaign trail that gets to the decency that the woman was talking about in that last report and how she wanted to vote for Vice President Harris because she didn't like that Madison Square Garden rally. I am mystified that despite all of that, he's gaining support compared to 2020. And it gets back to something I said earlier at some point, one of the hours ago, that who are we as a country? And we're starting to find out. And from what I'm seeing right now, I'm not sure I like it. And can I just say something on the trans issue? We need to remember, or folks need to know, that they're hammering, the Trump campaign is hammering the vice president over a policy that he continued and tinkered with, but continued in his presidency. And we're talking about a minuscule portion of the population. And I think this gets to my bigger issue, that hammering away at transgender people, promising a mass deportation plan without talking about how are you going to distinguish between who's here legally and who's here illegally. The disruption and chaos that he is promising for the country is stultifying. I am mystified by why we are here. Not saying that anything has happened and that the race has been called or anything, right. But again, we're about to find out about half the country was down with this.
The Donald Trump of 2024 is so unlike the Donald Trump of 2016 in a million different ways. But the one that stands out to me is that his closing message in 2016, you can argue the merits of it, but it was clear and it was coherent. It was about being tough on trade. It was about being tough on China. It was about beating back the Clinton and Bush duopoly. It was about draining the swamp. Fast forward to the current moment, you cannot draw a through line to the message that he is trying to convey to the American people. It was objectively dark and undisciplined.
The conversation seems to be drifting into she lost and let's diagnose, let's do an autopsy on.
We are nowhere near that right
exactly.
now.
We are nowhere, correct. We are nowhere near that. I think the vice president has run a fantastic campaign given that it's just been 107 days and what she's been able to do in that time. I find it interesting that the YouTube world is dominated by conservative voices, Trump voices, which gets to a point I wanted to make, which is in terms of people getting their news, that there's a whole right-wing echo chamber that amplifies all of the misinformation and disinformation that's going out there. And Fox News, the cable channel, the #1 cable channel in the country by multiples. When I look at my ratings for my show on MSNBC, I don't even bother to see if I beat Fox. I look to see if I beat CNN because Fox is way out ahead, and that's where people are getting their news. You can't use 2019. You cannot use her failed run in 2019 and hold it against her after watching this incredible campaign she's run now. If she was such a disaster,
is it incredible?
But Kevin, if she was such a disaster,
and can you not take it?
I'm sorry.
You absolutely can. you can take 2019 and apply it here. I mean, did she run an incredible race?
If 2019, if she were running the race she ran in 2019, we would not be having this conversation right now.
We should turn to Laura Barron-Lopez. She is actually with the Harris campaign, where she's been reporting all night.
I wondered if, people would be unwilling to tell pollsters that they didn't want to vote for a woman.
Boy, here we go.
And didn't want to vote for a black woman and South Asian woman. And so, again, this is why I'm looking at this, because we can't just say that, oh, her economic message wasn't right, or, oh, she didn't speak to this particular constituency about fill-in-the-blank issue. Could it be that the country still has an issue with a woman in the top job in the nation, if not the world?
So wait, play that forward for me. What does that conversation look like in Republican circles if former President Trump loses? What is that conversation for who leads going forward?
Well, if he loses, I think it's one of these things where
that every voice has spoken, so you won't hear from the vice president tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the mood, Amna, is one that is very anxious and nervous. Supporters are still holding out hope that the blue wall is going to come through for Harris, that Nevada will come through for Harris. But again,
we as a nation have to have a conversation about why this map looks the way it is. And I hear all the things about economics and populism and things like that, but we also have to factor in some social issues, why they voted the way they voted. And I'm not sure if people are willing to be as honest as I would like them to be, to talk about why this shift is happening.
Now, Arizona, very much in reach for Harris. So let's say he doesn't get it. Let's say he wins in Nevada. That's not enough. So Harris could still lose Wisconsin and Nevada, but as long as she gets Arizona, she still stays in the game. So what I'm telling you is, of these 5 states here, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, she's got to win, depending on the combination, 3 of them, especially Pennsylvania. The path is getting narrow, but it is there for both candidates right now.
And I've come to this election with an open mind, and I want to know what the American people have to say. What was it, 6 hours ago, I was mystified by what was going on. And now I can't help but think that if this election if it proves out that the millions of people who are watching Fox News, if that ends up being the case, then I can't help but wonder if the American people have given up on democracy.
I'll go.
David, we heard former President Trump there talk about helping the country to heal, about being a good leader for all Americans. Forgive my skepticism, but when, in the many years we've seen him on the national political stage, have we ever seen anything other than an incredibly divisive political figure?
To be honest, there's also a part of me that's not shocked. I mean, for a lot of people, this will be 2016 all over again, and for me, it's not. Because, I lived through the 4 years of Trump's administration. I remember what that was like. And I just have to say that this is a sobering moment for me as an African American, because things that he said on the campaign trail about giving power to police to do all sorts of things that would loop me in potentially to have an encounter with the police that I didn't ask for. As a gay American, I'm concerned, because that's the conservative supermajority on the court, particularly Justice Thomas, in his concurrence with the Dobbs decision, said, you know what, we should go after Obergefell, which legalized same-sex marriage. So my marriage is on the line. As a journalist, I'm concerned that despite all of that, he's gaining support compared to 2020.